Good evening and welcome to Working in the Capital. I'm your host, Susan Haywood. On tonight's show, we're going to be discussing workplace culture, what makes a workplace effective and what makes it more productive for employees. If you have any questions during the show, you can call us at 613-728-1001. Tonight I'm joined by two guests. Carol Ann Samhuber is a professor and program coordinator at the Business Administration School at Algonquin College, specializing in human resources. But first, I'm joined with Ian Anderson, who's also a professor at Algonquin College, and his specialties are organizational behavior and HR strategy. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Sue.
So there's been a lot of changes in Ottawa the last year regarding the work environment. From your perspective, what have some major changes been around sort of the organizational design of businesses in Ottawa?
I think some of the changes, even in Ottawa, one of the major factors would be globalization.
Okay.
Right? It used to be that if you were in manufacturing, you'd export all your products straight from here, but you're doing your sales, you're doing your research, you're doing things in other countries. So as you diversify in other countries, an Ottawa firm can no longer manage things the same way they would have 20 years ago. So they've had to really adapt to this new global environment. The globalization also brings this great thing, which is diversity.
Right.
We've got this added amazing feature, even in Ottawa. You look around the diversity we have just here without expanding to other countries. And diversity gives you all this kind of new innovation and new knowledge, but it also brings this sort of extra conflict and communication problems that the organizations have to really adapt to. I think organizations in Ottawa are becoming much more flexible, and by that I mean they don't get caught up in rules and policies and procedures as much. They have to sort of adapt to what's in the environment. And the environment's not stable anymore. It's a very dynamic environment for everyone. So we have to really plan a structure, plan our organization to adapt as much as possible. That means pushing more things on our employees. I think if we look at the Gen X, Gen Ys, the millennials, they have a different approach. So organizations have to adapt their design to them as well. They want alternative work arrangements like job sharing and flex time and those kind of things. So employers have to look at that. And then the structure themselves, I think, formerly we had these very tall bureaucratic structures, a lot of hierarchy. And organizations have said, well, we have to cut costs, so we need to get rid of some of that middle management. And they've pushed more things out to the employees. So when you have that decentralization, it really changes the way that we run an organization, which is both exciting and a little scary for a company. I think, in terms of another couple of structures that you see a lot in the industry, they've gone to sort of more of a network model. So you've got this idea that, well, we've got these core competencies, but we can't run a call center, and we're not good at accounting, and why do we want to do our own payroll? So let's ship that all out. Let's find the best people in the industry that do that. Let's set up a strategic alliance with somebody. And if we're good at this one thing, and if we're an Ottawa IT company and we're really good at this product design, or we're really good at the technology we're using, let everybody else handle the other stuff. And I guess the last one, the really kind of an interesting structure, is the matrix structure that a lot of people are using. So rather than say, organizations like the functional reporting, but then let's get other people involved. We don't need an HR person working in 3 different companies under the same umbrella.
Absolutely.
Let's have them work for all 3 companies, give them a whole lot of flexibility, a lot of adaptability. So I think those are some of the major trends.
Okay. From what I hear you saying, to me it seems a lot more that organizations need to look about what is it they're trying to achieve versus how is it they get there.
Right. Right. I think sometimes you get the HR strategy is a big part of organizational strategy.
Right.
And it used to be reactive, and right now HR is at the table. It's very proactive. How do we best make, what do we need to do in an organization to accomplish our goals? Like to your point, how do we fulfill our strategy?
Absolutely.
As opposed to let's build this structure, and how do we fit that to what we're doing, and then find it doesn't work.
Or make our deliverable fit our structure.
Absolutely.
Which is really backwards. So in this, obviously we've talked about the workplace environment itself, but how do you then take sort of that flexible, reactive proactive workplace that can adapt to globalization and form teams? How do they go together?
Well, the team part is great. You have to sort of identify, do we have the right kind of individuals for these teams? And with that diversity, we have to say, let's take advantage of those things. We mentioned some of the problems that come up in advance, but you really have to say, what am I trying to get out of teams? And at the end of the day, if you start saying, well, the research says that teams are going to give you better decision making. You probably have higher problem solving. You should have better creativity. Right? You should be able to go into some of these areas where the individual is part of a team, has to examine themselves. So as an employer, as an HR professional, it's a great opportunity to look at our employees and put a little bit of a spotlight on them and say, within this team structure, within this flexible, dynamic environment, how can you be the best person you can? So you're not just stuck working on your own. You're not just stuck reporting to one person. You get this great interactive environment. And so you find this team that can really bring out the best of all your people. And then you be really conscious of the negative things with a team. You know, you have to watch out for, are they spending too much time on, you know, the process of being a team as opposed to actually delivering?
Right.
And are they getting caught up in groupthink, or are they suffering from, you know, social loafing? Somebody is kind of hiding in that team thing. So, you know, a lot of the workplaces are moving away from specialization. And as you do that, that allows you a lot of flexibility with everybody coming in.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have any efficiency of a team then.
So I actually noticed quite a thread between those 2 points, that, you know, you were talking about the policies and practices of an organization have to adapt to a modern world, and you're also talking about teams. And if you're having individuals form teams, they actually have to be empowered to take action.
Right.
So how do you view that? You know, I think it has to impact the policies and procedures of an organization.
Yes, it does. I think, and I think the organization can set up some commonalities for the teams to become really, you know, what we call an industry high-performing work teams,
Right.
of course. And the idea is, if, you know, as long as you brought back the strategy as well, it all does interplay, like you mentioned. The strategy says, well, here's the vision and the purpose of our team.
Absolutely.
And that team says, this is what we're going. We set up some common standards for them. So how are they going to achieve the results? You know, what roles are people going to fulfill on those teams?
Right.
You sort of look at some of the key things, and how do we have the right composition? If we want this team to be effective, we need them to have all of the 3 key areas. Like, we need somebody who's a technical expert. We need somebody that's good at working with people, managing the resource. And we need somebody that's a problem solver. And then people can fill those different roles, but those 3 main roles have to be there in every team to be successful. Then you can do some smaller things. You can help them with, you know, as a team makes what the rules are, what the norms. So if we talk about rules and process, we can say, well, this is what we expect on feedback. This is what we expect on reporting.
Right.
This is what we expect on team communication. These are the milestones. These are the schedules. Who does all this? Who takes minutes? Who coordinates the meetings?
Absolutely.
Some of those things can really help you make that high-performing team.
Sounds good. We're talking about it sort of from the management side, but what are some steps that employees themselves can take to make a better work environment or a better team in their own organization?
Oh, that's good. I think that's a good question. I think part of it is there's work within the environment. And you have to step up and do things.
Right.
You have to take opportunities to be on separate teams. Even if it's the team that's coordinating the company softball team, or doing the first fundraising event for the company, you step in, you work with different people you haven't met. So you build up those connections, you build up that social part. I think on the other side, and a little bit it's my style, but I think you really have to look at yourself. So you have to be very self-aware.
Right.
So I'm going to say, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I'm going to look into myself. I'm going to kind of, when we talk about organizational behavior, it's really like psychology. And what makes me the person that I am? What makes me tick? So go online. There's all these great things. Go find a Myers-Briggs test online. Right. Go find True Colors. You know, do the Big 5 personality assessment. Everything you can find about yourself. There's some truisms in there.
Of course. Yeah.
So as we learn more that, oh, I'm really good at this and not so good at this. Yes, we should emphasize our strengths, but we should work a little on our weaknesses. The second part I would say would be, once we kind of have a more emotional intelligence or understanding of ourselves, is then we have to do something about it. So we have a little plan. So you set a little self-leadership. We got to say, this is what I want to accomplish. This is the role I'd like to be better. So some people say, I'm a natural leader.
Okay.
I don't think I have to be that. Or the opposite is, I'm not very good at leadership. So I'm going to work on this. I'm going to read on it. I'm going to practice it whenever I can. I'm going to set myself some goals. I'm going to then start monitoring that progress. I'm going to give myself some reinforcement. It's like anything you do in life. If you have a fitness challenge for yourself, you don't wait till the end of it to find out how well you've done.
That's right.
You monitor, you give yourself a little bonus, right? You have that glass of scotch at the end of the week if that's what you want to do. But in terms of you as an employee in a team, I think the key thing is just to say, I've looked at that, I'm developing those skills, and then find opportunities to practice. Get involved in a volunteer organization where you can do something you don't do somewhere else.
Totally.
And you can really step up to the table, because it's not your career. I know people are worried about doing things at work, maybe overreaching sometimes, and what happens if I don't succeed? Well, of course we learn from our failures, but I understand that employees might be cautious to have failures at work.
At work, right.
So why not try to learn, make mistakes in every opportunity you get?
Makes sense. I think it's also interesting too, as employees become more aware, self-aware of their own strengths and weaknesses, it helps them interact better with those around them.
Right.
So I might realize that I'm not good in an area that you are very good at. So I should think, you know what, I should work with Ian on that project because I could learn a lot from him.
Absolutely.
And instead of having it become a point of conflict, it actually becomes a strength.
Absolutely. In a work environment, every time I'm in a meeting, I'm always looking at and I'm observing people and how do they interact and how do they approach that situation, and then you think about, oh, that's not the way I would approach it at all. And theirs was an effective outcome. So
Right.
suddenly it gives you that great moment where you're like, oh, this is light bulb time.
Yeah.
Why don't I try that?
Absolutely.
And you sort of adapt to the different skills. That allows you in working as a professional in an environment to really be able to deal with all of your colleagues.
Yes.
In a diverse workforce, you can understand that your direct style isn't going to work out so well with some people of some cultures. They'll find it offensive.
Right.
And you won't understand what's going on. So you'll watch somebody playing it much softer and you're like, oh, I see what Sue just did there. That I want to try
that,
myself.
Yeah. No, I think that's it, and we learn so much from watching those around us, and I think that's, you know, we talked about diversity in a workplace last week on the show, but it's really about, you know, recognizing that we all have differences, and then how do we maximize those differences to create the best outcome.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's mirroring each other, and sometimes that's learning from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. There can be, you know, it doesn't have to be at work. You know, you're out on an event with some friends, and you just get you know, you want to catch up with them. You learn a little bit about what they're doing at work, and then you get them talking, and suddenly you learn something about how they approach a situation or how they solve a situation or what decisions they make, and you think, I can apply that to my life too.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, that we learn, you know, about the workplace, not just in the workplace or not just in school.
Exactly.
But lessons we take everywhere. And likewise, what we learn about in the workplace, we can apply in our personal lives and outside.
Absolutely.
That's great. What are some like if you think about when you most successful teams you've seen in a workplace, what are the real keys to success of a successful team?
I think the size is one of the key factors.
Okay.
So you know, a lot of the research says that, you know, 5 to 7 is a really ideal size. I think
Right.
organizations tend to approach that as far too many people.
Okay.
You know, even if you look at a board of directors, you know,
Right.
let's put 16 people on this board, the more people the better. Well, you get to this point where you spend all the time managing the team.
Right.
So I think those successful teams, as long as they have a good mix of diversity of individuals and some of the roles, I think, you know, the size is good. We've got the support. It's
Right.
good to give those. You really want the team to be running entirely autonomous. Like ideally, they're looking after one full work process or something on their own.
Right.
So
Okay.
not a little part, and then they don't have to get feedback from you. You give them something, they run with it, and then they can really do the whole thing. They come back to you and say, here, I'm done. They can come to you at any point for feedback, but you really want them to be autonomous. You want
Right.
them to have the flexibility, but you want them to have support. You give them communication, you recognize them at events and say, this is the team, they're working on it. So you have an end-of-year banquet or a lunch and learn, and they come and they speak to the rest of the employees. They get a chance to really sort of brag a little bit about what they're doing. It gives them the confidence, the recognition that now motivates them to go. You know, we realize that humans want to bond. You know, we all have this desire, we want to meet people. And so that some of the negatives that happen with groups, you know that's going to happen with the bonding.
Right.
So you try to you get the groups on an even keel where they understand that there are some times that they need to spend some time in non-work activities initially or at various points. If they've had some setbacks, they might need to kind of pull back and re-energize as a team.
Okay.
So maybe we don't focus about work at this one moment, and we actually spend some time doing something as a team together so that we actually build that confidence again. So I think the teams that do well, they have those knowledge, that knowledge diversity, they have different skills, and people are probably comfortable in multiple roles. You know, if you got somebody that's a natural leader, well, step away,
Right.
let somebody else shine.
Shine.
You know, so that everybody has that ability to be strong and do a different role and learn from the other perspective. If we understand what everybody's doing, we won't suddenly say, well, the leader should deserve a little bit more praise because I ran the whole thing. Well, no, that's not a
Not
good
the
leader
case.
then. So.
Absolutely. That's great. We'll be back with more with Ian Anderson on working in the Capitol. Call us with your questions at 613-728-1001. Stay tuned. welcome back to Working in the Capital. We're talking about workplace culture today.